Since the inception of the government of the All Progressives Congress (APC), the war against corruption has been intense. Nearly every sector that makes up Nigeria's economy has been touched as being corrupt, particularly in financial dealings. Individuals and group of persons have been arrested and questioned over financial recklessness, stealing of government's monies and diversion. In recent times, through the whistleblowing policy of the federal government, monies allegedly belonging to some top politicians, present and past government functionaries, and other persons have been recovered at several locations in the country, while anti-corruption agencies continue their investigations. In 2012, the government introduced the Treasury Single Account, a public accounting system using a single account or a set of linked accounts by government to ensure all revenue receipts and payments are done through a Consolidated Revenue Account (CRA) at the Central Bank of Nigeria. The TSA helps check incidents of multiple accounts operated by government MDAs for collection and spending of government revenues. Efficient management and control of government's cash resources rely on government banking arrangements. Nigeria, like many low-income countries, employed fragmented systems in handling government receipts and payments. Establishing a unified structure, as recommended by the IMF, where all government funds are collected in one account, would reduce borrowing costs, extend credit, and improve government's fiscal policy, among other benefits to government. The introduction of the Treasury Single Account policy, therefore, was vital in reducing the proliferation of bank accounts operated by ministries, departments, and agencies towards promoting financial accountability among government organs. The compliance of the policy in Nigeria created challenges for majority of the MDAs. Commercial banks in Nigeria remitted over 2 trillion naira worth of idle and active government deposits with full implementation of the policy in 2016. A United Nations report recently disclosed that $1 trillion was stolen from Africa in 50 years. The UN Economic Commission for Africa, UNECA, says an estimated $50 billion leaves the shores of the continent illicitly, mostly to the Western countries, every year, a trend that has brought negative development impacts on the continent. Laundering proceeds of crime, abuse of power, market regulatory abuse, and tax abuse have been highlighted as the origins of illicit financial flows. Taking prompt action to curtail illicit financial flows in Nigeria is the focus of this gathering. The Vice President, Professor Yemi Oshibajo's arrival kicks off the conference. The conference, organized by PACAC, is on promoting international cooperation of combating illicit financial flows and enhancing asset recovery to foster sustainable development. The anti-corruption parley, also attended by multinationals, looks at illegal practices such as direct looting, money laundering, tax evasion, profit shifting by multinational corporations, trade mispricing, among others. The VP talks tough against the backdrop of massive looting of public treasury and persistent illicit financial flows, warning banks and financial institutions who are perceived accomplices in illicit transactions.
at a conference organized by the Transparency International in Peru. I believe it was in 1995 or so. We who came from African countries and developing countries that were intent on identifying what to do with proceeds of corruption and ensuring that proceeds of corruption were described as dirty money and as such were criminalized, and that the whole process of passing around proceeds of corruption will be criminalized. We went there with an agenda, and we thought that we'll be able to convince everyone else that the proceeds of corruption was indeed dirty money, and that banks, financial institutions, everybody alike, should treat it as such. When somebody loots the resources of a country and deprives millions of people of the means by which they would even make a decent existence, that is even more criminal. That is a crime against humanity, possibly even worse than trafficking in drugs. I wonder how many people, I'll just talk very briefly about the whole idea that this cannot happen. The transfer of these assets up and down the place cannot happen without a handshake, if you like, between the countries where they are transferred and the institutions and countries to which they are transferred, especially the financial institutions. There is no way that it will happen without some form of connivance between international banking institutions and those who transfer these funds. So we must work at somehow delegitimizing those kinds of transactions and criminalizing them. So just as Mr. Keremuna said, so that banks and financial institutions that are engaged in this are actually called out and they are made to face the consequences of engaging in criminal conduct. If that isn't done, then we're not likely to get very far. We must find the ways, and I think that a lot of the bilateral type agreements and talks that we should be engaging in and the conventions that we should be looking forward to signing in the coming years must be those that work hard at ensuring that financial institutions are not given a free run. Financial institutions are key to all of this, and whatever we do, we must hold financial institutions accountable.
The Vice President decries the dirty way corruption is fighting back, especially through the media. He says corruption must be tackled and handled as a criminal act.
Corruption for Nigeria and for countries like us is an existential problem. If we don't solve the problem of corruption, it's President Buhari who has said this repeatedly, if we don't kill corruption, corruption will kill us. That is the same for most African countries. It's the same. And when corruption finds safe havens, when corrupt money finds safe havens, it is emboldened and is able to fight back. We are experiencing in Nigeria a situation where corruption fights back, and fights back so persuasively, so eloquently sometimes, and with such resources that government itself, if government is not careful, it can be overwhelmed. And it is because the resources have safe havens everywhere. There is if you look at the anti-corruption fight in Nigeria, you can tell that there is a major fight back. There's a media war against the fight against corruption. You will find people who will put stories in the media that suggest that there is something wrong with fighting corruption. People will tell you, for instance, that, look, it's all media trials. That is a media trial. I don't know what that means. If you discover, for example, large sums of money are discovered in a place, there is nowhere in the world where it will not make the news. There's nowhere in the world. If you go and find somebody who puts large sums of money in an air-conditioned room, there's nowhere in the world where it will not make news. There's nowhere in the world. So this whole idea of trying to delegitimize the anti-corruption struggle is definitely fueled and funded by those who have these resources, who have stolen these resources. And I think it's important for us to understand that unless we see it as an existential problem for us, unless we as Africans, we as Nigerians see it as a problem that can bring down all of our systems, we're never going to be able to fight. We're never going to be able to fight against corruption. And I think that this is a point which I hope we will be able to advance, especially with other African countries.